Hello and welcome back to Rage Gaming. My name is Hollow and it's time for another 1.07 build. Today we look at Destined Death once again as it saw improvements to all three types that you can do. That's the dagger, that's the colossal sword, and that's of course the Black Blade incantation. Yep, they've all had changes and some of them multiple. First and very importantly, Destined Death itself, when it hits an enemy, it will last way longer, up to a minute now, which is incredibly long compared to before. In 1.04, this dagger Ash of War, the Blade of Death, was made much quicker, which makes it a top tier way to actually get Destined Death on an enemy. In 1.07, our newest patch, our colossal weapon Maliketh's Black Blade here, and its Ash of War Destined Death, this Ash has been made much faster, that initial swing coming out much quicker, the whole thing much more threatening. Even the basics of colossal swords have changed with much heavier attacks that deal more posture damage, staggering people, even full holding them in place after one basic hit if they're wearing cloth armor. And while yes, the poke is definitely worse than it used to be, they have improved the base move speed of various attacks of the Colossal Sword moveset to compensate. Lastly, our Black Blade incantation has been made better in a bunch of different ways. It costs less stamina to use in combat, we have better recovery time to control ourselves, we also have much better turn control on that follow-up, so we're able to track a target as it moves around significantly better. Even the blows land at the same time, be it the ranged and the melee, making for better burst damage. With these three methods then, you can land 2 Destined Death within a short period of time pretty easily, and that leads to the minus 20% health reduction, which could be huge in a boss fight. It's an exciting time for Destined Death builds, which have seen consistent love every major patch, and now more than ever. With that in mind then, we're going to try it all at once in today's build, all three types of Destined Death, and let's start as always with PvP. For this build, we use all three Destined Death options, or at least have them as options. I can cast the Black Blade incantation, I can slam down with the Colossal Sword Ash of War, and I can throw out that ranged dagger art itself. With that dagger in particular, thanks to 1.04, the Ash comes out much quicker than it once did, and at good range too. You can still use this at melee distance though, in PvE or PvP, because it has this sort of low-level hyper armor that allows for it to actually go off even if you do get hit, which is nice. The dagger itself can be useful in PvP though, as a surprise quick attack where you do those quick slashes, even staggering enemies with lower level armor. That's great to mix up with the slower hits of say the Colossal Sword or the casts, and I found it was a great way to finish people, especially when they were low. I find the dagger remains one of the best ways to get Destined Death on the player as fast as possible, because yeah, in 1.07 it lasts a lot longer, up to a minute, and that can often be the entire duration of the entire duel. Just like before, sometimes when they roll they hit the Ash, but the effect still lands on their player, the Destined Death effect will still apply. It might not do the burst of damage, but you'll get the dot, and you'll get that minus 10% health debuff. The same could be said for the Colossal Sword's Ash of War, which cleaves outward way quicker now, followed of course by the plunge down into the ground, and then the third part of the Destined Death AoE. They don't seem to respect its explosion radius, and much like the dagger's Ash, that tick can catch them mid-roll, dealing the dot on the minus 10% health, even though they technically evaded it. That can be threatening on its own, but I find the Ash of the Colossal Sword just phenomenal now. Thanks to that increased speed, you can blindly trade with it pretty often, or better, you want to weave it into a trade combo after some basic attacks, or maybe even a poke when they're going to commit to the trade. If you do get it off in full though, you've got the initial swing, you've got the slam down, and you get the explosion, which can halve people's health or more if you hit them with this. This Ash works really well with the core combat of Colossal Swords that have changed a bit now in 1.07, where you have the slower swings but big hits, which can be followed up by that surprise cleave of the Ash. This Ash change feels very good for the weapon, which kind of counters the nerf to the Colossal Sword poke really well. Now admittedly the poke is nothing like it used to be for Colossal Swords, it's much slower and also a smaller hit zone, so it's less likely to actually hit. But I'll be the first to say it was stupid before. You could just spam poke and catch people over and over, dealing stupid damage with that phantom range that it seemed to have. These days, in 1.07 and beyond, Colossal Swords seem to play like they used to in the Soulsborne series, all about trading to get the bigger hit and staggering them with the posture damage. That works really well with the Ash of War, or surprising them with dagger stabs like I mentioned, but it's that new posture damage of the colossal weapons that seems to really stagger people who are wearing light armor. I faced someone with cloth armor today. One simple light swing would full stagger them, guaranteeing a second hit. That's crazy good. And the poke still does work, it's just the range is nowhere near as good as it used to be. I had one duel where I went for the poke and it would have won me the duel before, but I just didn't reach him this time. You can still combo the poke into the Ash of War, like I said, and that seems to really catch people actually. The follow-up swing comes out pretty quick, so it seems to cover where you'd be exposed after the slow poke, so that works well. When it comes to the Black Blade incantation then, I do have some good news. It does feel way better. The turning performance makes a huge difference for the follow-up swing, where you'd never really be able to land it if they rolled through you. Now you can track them and turn a full 180 nearly, and then with the damage of the spell and the physical blade hitting it once now, it's actually respectable damage. Having all three in your toolkit will mean you have 3 versions of Destined Death to work with, which means you can stack them, and they're all better than their original versions by a mile now. Being smart with the 3 options and playing the mind games with your opponent is very fun once you're comfortable and confident at swapping between them all. But I would say that just using, say, the sword and the dagger, or double daggers, or running the incant in a faith build as a tool, that'll work really well. The more I kept it simple, the more effective the build felt, because when you've got this many options, outplaying yourself is definitely a possibility. Though I will say, trying to use all 3 and making it work was really fun. On the other side of things though, we still have PvE to talk about. Now obviously being able to reduce the boss's health by 10% or even 20% for the duration of the fight is huge. When it's a late game boss with a huge health pool, you just did this massive chunk of damage just by doing the first hits. When it comes to getting the most out of your damage though, I found a quick dagger Ash of War to start the fight, get Destined Death going, that works well, or starting with the Black Blade incantation. Then from there it's opportunities to get big Colossal Sword hits and the full Colossal Sword Ash of War. Combining that with a poke or a light attack combo straight into the Ash, that seemed to work well. But because it's so much quicker than it used to be now, you can just kind of chain it out over and over if you get the opportunity to do. And there is some hyper armor, especially if you're running good posture with armor or talismans, where you can just trade and go for it anyway. This will lead to staggers and even criticals. But the thing is, with this build, it's not like you have to play melee only. You could go full range or mix it up where necessary, using the dagger Ash of War and the incantation to great effect at range. These range attacks will track bosses really well, even when they're jumping around big distances. But do remember, the incantation wants to try to hit with both the blade and the range part ideally, both times for the biggest damage. It still feels strong and effective to me now, but it feels like there's more windows of opportunity and more punish options with things being a bit quicker. But now let's go over the build and what things to use depending on whether you're doing PvE or PvP. As you've seen in the footage, we're making use of both the dagger and the sword, but you could alter this build to just run 1 or 2 of these 3 things, because of course we're also running the incantation. When it comes to the dagger itself, it's quite simple. Having it in the main hand allows you to, even when holding both, just throw out the Ash of War whenever you need to, and then suddenly be doing the slower swings one-handed right into the quick swipes, which, like I said, works amazing in PvP. Then we can go to two-hand the Colossal Sword to use that more directly, and of course use the Ash of War. In my offhand, I've got my Seal to then cast Blade of Death, or Black Blade rather, and we can combo that fully for the full hits. When it comes to the armor, it's purely cosmetic, but like I've said, I would recommend you get as much poise, as much heaviness you can get away with to give you as much trading options as possible. Now for PvE, I like to run Erdtree's Favor for the health and stamina and all that. I like to use Shadow of Alexander to improve my Ashes of War, and because they're pretty expensive on FP, Carrion Filigree Crest works great to reduce that because we are spamming them. For PvE, I use the Sacred Scorpion Charm to raise the holy attack of these weapons. But in PvP, I would take that out because I don't like damage negation in PvP, and run something like Bull Goat's Talisman to raise our poise so we can trade much better. The Wondrous Physic, very important. This has the Holy Shrouding Crack tier to improve holy damage, and the Leaden Hard tier to again boost poise for the trading that you'll be doing. For the other incantations, as always, Golden Vows can increase the attack damage you're going to be doing, as well as giving you some defense, and then Flame Grant Strength is going to improve the physical side ever so slightly. So if I were to two-hand my Colossal Sword with this build, we're up to 1,268 damage on the basic hits, and even more, of course, with the Ash of War. If you're interested in the stats that I'm running, these are the ones I'm using for this build to make it all work. If you were just going to run 2 or 1, you don't need quite as much faith, but I would recommend some extra mind if you're spamming a lot of the incantations or ashes, because they can be expensive. But there you have it. That is the Destined Death build of 1.07. Much more effective and very fun to play. The changes to both the incantation, the Colossal Ash of War, they feel really good. Right off the back of the wonderful dagger buff back in 1.04. So Destined Death, I think it's feeling much more relevant. Do I feel like it could still see buffs? Maybe, but only perhaps to the damage over time, the dot that doesn't feel that relevant. They could make that a bit more interesting. But either way, that's the build and my thoughts. If you've enjoyed the video, do drop a like on it. And if you want to see another build from me, give me a suggestion, drop it in the comments. But now though, I've been Hollow, you've been you. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.